right, so I guess the first thing to know about these boards when you're using them and trying to operate them is to keep in mind that they basically function like they're a giant tablet. Specifically, they're a giant Android tablet, and even more specifically, a giant Android tablet from like 5 years ago, just because that's kind of the version they have on there. So as far as interacting with menus, trying to move apps around and locating where menus are, you have to remember like you're not always going to have like the same kind of navigation bars. If you're ever doing anything online with like the built-in browser that it has, it's going to by default, like it's going to look like the browser that would have been on Android devices several years ago, but it's also always going to take you like to the mobile version of any website. If you go to youtube.com, it'll take you to the mobile version, which you can still do everything. You can still access everything, just it's going to look different than the regular website that you might access. As well, once you're actually signed in and everything, we will get like a Chrome browser pushed out to these boards, and that's getting to them as they all get updated, so they won't have like this just gigantic address bar up at the top. It'll be a little bit easier, and you'll be able to sign in to Chrome and use some of the Chrome specific features. This is a Chromium browser, so it functions similar to the way like a normal internet browser that you're used to works, but you're not able to sign into this one to be able to access all of your Google tools. And once we're done getting these boards updated, you will have that option. And so the main thing you're going to be using your board for, and the biggest feature of these boards, is a lot of the programs that are built into the whiteboard software that's on here. And so you can find it in a variety of ways. It's the easy button on the bottom will take you to the whiteboard program. On either side, there's kind of a quick navigation menu on either side of the board. And from there, there's an option to get to the easy whiteboard software as well. So from within here, this is where, if you're using the built-in software on here, where you're probably going to be spending a lot of your time with if you just need that whiteboard functionality. So from within here, there's a handful of things you can do. If you're used to programs like Smart Notebook and those kind of things, this isn't nearly as feature rich as those kind of programs. This functions a lot more simply just as a big digital whiteboard. And so you'll have all your tools like within your pens, your different pen styles. You can change the color, you can change pen size. The board comes with two different pens, one like a broad tip and one a fine tip, but the board doesn't actually distinguish which one you're using. Like it doesn't make a skinny line for one and a large line for the other. It's just whatever you choose. That's what it's going to do for both of them. So as well, I mean, from in there, you have your options, just like any of these kind of programs that you might be used to. As far as if you want to have two different colors for the two different pens, you can do that, or different brush types. And so this one would allow you to set, like it shows you one color for one pen, a different color for the other pen. So that is the one time you will notice that they'll distinguish between the two, but it doesn't give you a different like tip size or anything. It'll be the same for both of them. Erasing, you have two different erase options, but by the default one is like a circle to erase. So whatever you circle gets erased, and all, like it says, clears everything on the screen except the background. The other erasing option, if you've been drawing something just a little bit faster, is you have, if you want a small eraser, you can just use the side of your hand and erase. If you want a large eraser, and it can be a little bit finicky, but you just use the palm of your hand and it makes a big eraser. And so that's a little bit of a faster option if you want to erase something precisely. But you have to be careful with the palm eraser, because if your fingers are touching it too, sometimes it might just like end up drawing on it while you're trying to use it. You have to be very careful to make sure like bend the fingers back so it's just palm touching it and nothing else. There's a handful of built-in tools that you can use in it. A math tool that's got some fun functionality as far as like drawing math problems, like their example there. And one can be a nice thing if this is actually something that you're using in class, is that it doesn't ever show the answer until you put an equal sign on it, and then it just solves it like a calculator. And from there, I mean, if you need to change something, oops, it didn't register what I tried to do. But in general, like as you're drawing, if I can get it to register correctly, usually allows you to Yeah, cross out, get rid of numbers, replace it with something else. Add
And then if you click the clear thing, it's gonna
yep, it just resets it.
Oh.
Yep. And so there's a variety of different problem types and ways you can manipulate it and use that and make that working space as large as you need it to be. The next one is, it's kind of to help you if you're someone that like me, I was always terrible at trying to just freehand shapes. Like if you just need a nice circle, this kind of program will help you make a nice neat circle that you can export right into the board. If you need like specifically a right triangle that actually looks like a right triangle, it's easy to make those and export them into the board. And to move it around, you have to select your object tool, and you can grab your objects, move them around, shrink them, make them bigger, like it's a tablet. You pinch to zoom in and out. Okay. Rotate them, although that's a circle. And get rid of them.
Oh, so if you get rid of them, you just touch it and...
Yep, you touch it and hit the X. And it'll be the same way, like if you've drawn something, if you switch over to the object grabbing tool, you can grab it, you can move it around, you can make it bigger, you can rotate it, or get rid of it. Okay. Then there's just a stopwatch and a timer, which function exactly like you would expect a stopwatch and a timer to function. Countdown timer that will play a little jingle when it gets done. It's quiet by default, but you can turn up the volume on your device if you want it to be louder. There is a random number picker for anytime if you need to pick students. If students have numbers or you need to put students into groups, those kind of things, you would choose how many are going to be in that group, what the range of numbers is, and click start, and it will automatically grab a few random numbers for you.
Okay.
This tool, the next tool, is just a post-it note tool, and it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It's a post-it note. You can put a post-it note on your screen.
Okay.
Once it's there, though, you're not able to change the size of it or anything. It just, if you need a little note hanging up there with an equation that's just stuck up there on your board or that kind of a thing, written in a little bit of a fancier way. There's a scoreboard functionality. If you're playing a game of some kind in your class, you choose how many teams there are, and then as you're playing and as your students are gaining points, it has like a little animation that'll show you who's currently winning. The easy diagram program is, again, similar to like the shape drawer, as far as like if you're trying to create some kind of diagram. It'll help you kind of clean up your drawing. So if you're trying to make something like that, it'll kind of guess, if you hit identify, it'll try to fix up exactly what you were drawing. Mm-hmm. You can export it back into your original ones if you're needing to then like draw on it and things like that. So it's stuck in there then as the background. So like when you actually go to erase, what you put in there won't go away. And then the last one has some cool functionality as well. This one essentially splits up your board into 3 smaller boards if you're having multiple students come up to the board and work at the same time. Mm-hmm. And obviously, since there's multiple pens, it's not required that you do this, but this then gives each student that's up at the board kind of their own pen, their own eraser. They can choose whatever color they want for their own little section. Because the board has, I believe it's 20 points of touch that it'll register in it. Meaning that like on any one spot, or I guess in this mode, it'll only register one at a time. But in the regular mode, it, like you could do like 8 fingers going on. It's going to make 8 lines on the board. But this allows each students, if they're each working on their own problem and that kind of a thing, right over here, if you want a question to show up for that the students are trying to answer, over on the left side, there's this question mark kind of option. So choosing that will then allow you to select a question that your students are solving. And clicking paste all then, it's just one little way for them to all see the exact problem that they're working on solving. And getting out of here is just, you can trash everyone's post if you're needing to. Save it if you need to save their work for something. And then when you go out, it's gonna again ask if you want to save this picture, save the work that was done here. And then it brings you back here again. So that's all the tools that they have available for you.
Okay.
Some of the other options, if you're just wanting to bring in, you have a photo from your Google Drive, you have a photo that you found online, those kind of things that you want to be able to just stick it into the board or stick it onto the board as an object that you can move around and turn and spin. That's what you would use this next one for. You have the option of importing either a photo or a document if you have a PDF of a worksheet or something that you want to pull up on the board so you can write on it. You do that right here is your image option and your just a file option. If you want to insert an image into this, that would be the background of your board. And so something that similar to this that you're not going to be able to accidentally like touch and move around. It's just on there as your background, like if you're a math teacher wanting to use graph paper on it and just have a graph paper background or doing that kind of a thing, then you'll be over here is where you get some like your page customization options are in this bottom right corner. As far as, well, you have your undo and redo buttons. And then this little button here would be the wallpapers. And so there's a few just color options, like if you're working in a darker room or just the white can be too harsh on the eyes since it's really bright. You can just do a softer white. You can do just like a full like white writing on a black background. That can be a lot easier on some people's eyes, or if you're working with the lights off in the room. As well, there are some built-in preset backgrounds that you can use, such as like a timeline, a diagram, writing paper, musical notation, checklist, some sports usage kind of programs, but there's not a ton to them, and there's going to be a lot of instances likely where you're going to want something as your background. Like if you want grid paper that looks a little bit different than, like if you're wanting grid paper that actually has like an XY axis on it, and you're going to be looking for something different. What you're going to need to do then is there's a little plus sign option to add a custom background. Now, in order to add a custom background, it's going to need to already be something that is downloaded onto the board itself. So you used like the browser that's built into the board, you went on Google Images, or you went into your Google Drive, somewhere where you have an image saved, because you're only going to be able to pull in what's currently saved on the board as an image. And like you can see, this is a brand new board kind of in its default settings, so there's no pictures to pull in. But if you're saving it onto your board, you'll find it right in here, and you'll be able to then load in a custom background. And it could be a worksheet that you have that you're working on, just different graph paper. If you're wanting an image of some kind just as your background. And so your background then would mean that no matter what you do to your board, erasing, moving stuff around, the background won't move, the background won't change. So that'll stay constant and so then the next option down here is just creating a new page, which again does exactly what it sounds like. Creates a new page, and you can give that new page whatever background you want it to have. Your pages won't all have the same background unless you're needing them to, because by default it'll kind of put the same background on there, but you can set it to whatever you want it to be. If you press between these two options here, it'll kind of give you kind of a page navigation window that you can easily like see through your pages and jump to whichever one you want. As well, again, operating kind of like a tablet or a smartphone does, you can move them around if you kind of hold down on one, if you need to change the order of your slides. If you need to add a brand new slide, you can do that from here. If you want to duplicate one of your slides, if you want to delete one of your slides, you can do that from within this little page navigation menu. So again, that's just clicking on, this one says 3 of 3, and choosing the page that you want. Like I showed earlier, there is like a hand erasing option, but depending on who's using the board, students, sometimes they can be finicky and bumping other people's. If that's not something you're wanting to use, if you just like using the built-in eraser, you do have the options in your settings down here. That's really the only setting that you'll probably ever actually tweak. That is, you can, if you want to, you can turn the palm eraser on or off. So some other things they have within here that teachers have asked about is the ability to save your work that you've done on here. So if you created slides on here, if you did a lecture and we're doing notes up here, anything like that that you want to be able to keep a record, maybe for yourself, maybe so you can use again the next day, maybe so you can send to a student who's working virtually or who's on quarantine or just missed that day of school for one reason or another. Right down here in the bottom left corner, you have a couple options for how you're kind of getting some of that information out to students. You have the second option here is saving it. You can, exactly like it says, you can save all of the pages that you've worked on. You can save them as PDFs if there's something that you're wanting to print out when you're done. If you want to use them, if you ever want to use these exact slides again, so if you wrote a bunch of notes on it and you want to be able to access those again later, you'll want to save it just as separate pictures, and you would choose, let's say, I was only wanting to save that last one.
Does it save to my Google Drive?
No, by default, unless your Google Drive has been connected, which none of them are until you go in and set that up yourself, which is something we can go over with you to make sure you get your Google Drive connected to your BenQ account.
So it just saves on the computer?
It saves on the board by default. Yep. It'll save it just locally into the hard drive that's built into the board.
Okay.
And it'll usually be just in a folder that it calls downloads. But later on, once that's done, you have the option of moving them around. If your Google Drive is connected, if your Google Drive is connected, you would see a third option right here that says Google Drive on it. And so when you go to save it, you'd be able to select your Google Drive and put it in whatever folder you wanted in your Google Drive. And once that's set up, that'll be connected to your account. So just every time you sign into the board, you will have that option. And so if that's, oops, I was meaning to actually save it. Let's say I wanted just that one, saving it as a picture. I save it as a picture because I want to be able to access it again on the board. So in general, I would say if you're next going to just be using it from your computer, you'll probably want to save it as a PDF, like if you're going to print it or send it to students or share it to your Google Classroom. But if you want to use it again on the board, you'll want to save it as separate pictures. And so I'll just save it just in its default location. Unless it doesn't let me.
Why does it say user local public? It doesn't.
That's interesting. It won't let me. It might just be because of this, because we're in the default user account, that it won't let me save it internally, I guess. That's something I just learned. So typically though, if you're actually in your account, it will save it just onto the board. And so the next day, if you want to access all of this again, you'd be able to go into your backgrounds, select a custom background. And if I had been able to save it, it would have just been right here in the downloads. You could load that image back in kind of as your background for the next day. What you're not able to do, which I've heard as a request from a lot of teachers, or teachers are curious to know if they can do that kind of thing. If you save it like this, if you save it as an image and then the next day you upload it as the background, you're not going to be able to change what's on it because it's now the background. It's not your images anymore. So that's going to be the first way. If you're wanting to get this information out or keep a record of it, would be to save it as a picture, one slide or all the slides. The next option you're probably going to use would be the recording function, just the little red dot. So that's one, as soon as you hit to record, it'll instantly start recording everything that occurs on the screen. And that's both in this whiteboard app and any other apps you might be using on the board. You can see in the top right corner, it says it's now recording. As well with the microphones that are built into the board, it will record your voice as well. And so this is an option then, because it can be for if you're just making a lesson virtually that you're going to be sharing out, or if you want a record of a lesson for students that might be absent or not in class. And so once you've hit record any work that you do on the board, it records exactly what's taking. It's doing a screen recording of everything that goes on the board and everything you say. So even if you're jumping around, like even if you leave this program, it'll still be recording this screen. So if you go into YouTube and you're showing a video to your class or jumping between different apps and programs, it'll record all the while you're jumping around until you hit the stop. Once you stop it, by default, again, it saves it just onto the internal storage of the board, onto the board's hard drive. and it'll be in the downloads folder. That if you want to get it out of there, the easiest way will be once you have your Google Drive connected to the board, you can just kind of like move it from the board to your Google Drive, and then you'll have access to it on your computer or anywhere you have access to Google Drive.
So how do I connect my Google Drive to the board? Is that another lesson that we need to do? Or?
Probably, because that's kind of an online process. You would go to a website that you would go to get an account created and signed up and logged in, and then connect the two accounts together.
Does it take a long time to
No.
do that?
It's not tough to do. Because I think
Should we set another schedule for that, or?
probably, I mean, you can, it's a simple process. I'll show you how to do it. It's if she has an account created, which I think Lisa creates accounts as soon as people get their boards. So if that's the case, then yeah, it's a pretty straightforward process once you have an account. Another option you have, and this one probably won't be as popularly used, but it is a function that's available within this software, is there is kind of a sharing and collaboration ability, which my guess is that...
You know, I have a question on
Yes,
that.
yeah.
It has been my problem because, okay, I was showing my lesson to my students, and then suddenly another screen from, I don't even know who the teacher is, because it just popped suddenly, like 1 second. So I couldn't even see who was that teacher. It just popped on my screen, and then it just changed all the features of my screen. Everything changes.
So you were seeing someone else's whole
Yes.
entire screen?
Yes.
My guess would be if that happened that... And do you know if it was a teacher or if it was a student? Could you tell from the screen?
Probably it's a teacher.
Okay. Because
But-
these boards do have a functionality within them for any kind of like a Google device or those kind of things, phone, Chromebooks, computers, to be able to broadcast, to share their screen directly with it, because they have the equivalent of a Chromecast basically built into them.
So they just share it to anybody, and
By default, if they're on the network, I think they're open and able to be shared too.
so how can I stop that from happening? Because it just messes everything on my screen.
Does it happen like frequently?
It just, yeah, and I even asked your office, and somebody came in here and fixed it. But then there was a time that he was having also trouble and fixing my thing, because I don't know, it's just complicated, I guess. And I'm not a tech savvy person, so.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, if it's because my guess would be that it's the Chromecasting function that's being used within the board, and if that is the case, I don't know that there's much we can do to.
Can you switch back to like HDMI 1?
Yeah, you should be able to. I mean, at the very least, if it occurs, it's changing the input, so you could still always use one of the navigation menus and like navigate back to where you're on. Because my guess is if it's doing that, it's probably like jumping over and using this InstaShare program.
Yeah, but what happens sometimes when he changed the features of the screen of the board, for example, I was showing the whole thing. So my lesson is showing on the whole board, and then when he pops on that screen, it like my lesson would just fit into a certain portion of the board, and I don't know how to make it, how to make it back to just fit the whole screen. I don't know how to do that. So.
And that's when like your computer is connected to it,
Yes.
and the board's showing what's on your computer screen.
Yeah, but in my computer, it's showing the whole thing in the screen. But in my board, when that thing pops up, it just fills up a certain portion of my board. I don't know what he's doing that it changes everything on my smartphone, my board.
Is that a setting in InstaShare?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's InstaShare. I don't know what's doing that.
Yeah,
Because I think that there's the moderator mode, and then there's presentation mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're in that moderator mode, it does allow you to have multiple input sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they'll show multiple
So
screens.
how do I stop them from doing that? I mean, how do I stop it? If like I just want to show my stuff and not be bothered by someone else's screen.
I don't know. I mean, it would depend if it can be. I guess, I mean, at the very least, I mean, if moderator mode appears, if it's turned on, you would have to say that they could use it. Because yeah, any student device, any student Chromebook, because they're all able to cast, would be able to like search and be able to find your room. But they would need the connect code.
In order to connect, they have to put that code in.
Yeah, and so I don't know how they could do it if they don't have that code.
If it were a student pulling a prank on you, then conceivably they could write down that number, and then in the next class they could go ahead and punch that number in and start chromacasting. But there is that little refresh button right next to the connect code, and if you tap that, it just changes the number in the top right corner.
Oh yeah, and because that was out there on the main screen, wasn't it?
Yeah, you
yeah.
also disabled
Yeah, that we need to remove that from there.
So I just have to go to the...
Here, and what should take care of it, and now that that's off of there, and we've reset your code, they shouldn't be able to do that anymore. And even if a student tries to, something will pop up asking you if you want to let them do that. Now that moderator mode is on. So that should take care of that problem. I hadn't heard of that happening yet, but then again, I work mostly with the elementary ones, and those kids don't usually try those kind of things, whereas middle school and high school kids do.
Some middle school.
Yeah, I haven't worked with other boards. I haven't seen that turned on by default on any boards yet. So yeah, it's because that was up there. It was showing your students or anyone that saw it basically how they could overtake the board. And so that should be gone now. So other things within here, there are a handful of apps built into the board itself. Again, like I said, most of what you're going to be using is probably going to be that Easy Write program, which is the button that's built right in there. Especially if you have a computer nearby, you might just be using the browser and things like that on there. But from here, Easy Write you might be using a lot. If you ever need to find files that you've saved onto your computer, if you made a video and it says it's saved and it went somewhere, you'll find that in here in the apps. It's called the AMS files. And so that's where like that little recording I just made, it got saved in here. If you save an image, it's probably going to by default save it in here. And once you have your Google Drive connected, you'll just see over on the side navigation, there will be just a separate box that'll say your Google Drive. And then from there, you can move stuff back and forth. You can open stuff from your Google Drive. If you needed to move this over to your Google Drive, you could select it and choose to move it to your Google Drive if you need to have access to it somewhere other than the board. Otherwise, if you are using it online, or even if you're using it while it's connected to your computer, you do always have some overlay tools available to you. So even when your computer is connected to it and it's just showing you your desktop on here, you do still have some of like this little easy circle on the bottom, gives you just some like quick tools that show up on top of everything else. No matter what input you're on, you could still access these tools to be able to, if you're using a YouTube video and you want to be able to like highlight certain portions of it or draw on top of it, you have a drawing tool there. You have a tool, this one will take you straight to the easy board. This one is an eraser tool. This one opens your files. This one here can take screenshots of whatever's on your screen, big or small, either whole area like that, or you can shrink it down to just certain areas, or use your fingers if you want to grab that screenshot. And from here, you can then either close out of the screenshot ability, go back to being full screen, save your image, or this easy one takes that image then and it'll stick it straight into your easy board. If you had an online, something that you're needing to grab a screenshot from, it'll be there and you can manipulate it as an image, make it bigger, smaller, rotate it, and get rid of it. And so yeah, no matter what input you're using, so even if you're using your computer input, you'll still be able to bring up that easy menu to be able to draw on top of everything.
And can we, not to interrupt, but can we demonstrate what it looks like to go over into the computer mode?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So to access your computer once you're in this mode, to change your inputs, there's a couple ways. Again, on either of the side menu, there's one that's kind of a box with an arrow on it, but you also have that option down at the bottom, opens up your inputs that are available. If it's grayed out like that, that means nothing's connected to those. And so usually your computer will be the HDMI that's actually white, that's actually showing up there. So selecting that, if your computer is on, connected, choosing that will then bring you to your computer screen as far as the computer that's connected to your board itself. And then you should still have your touch functionality available, be able to move around, navigate up and down on the page, as well as use any of these tools that are built in, like still be able to use the easy drawing tool, even if you're on your computer screen. And so like even from here, you would still have the option of drawing on your screen. You could record from right here as well if you wanted to do kind of a screencast of sorts from this whole screen. You can take screenshots still when you're right here. If you want to take a screenshot, you can grab it and save it. And so no matter what you're in, you still always have access to these easy tools. And it's also a quick place if you need them to go away. It's the easy button. It makes it like a transparency on top of everything you're doing. Because once those easy tools are open, you're not going to be able to click on anything on the screen. Like any touch you try to make right now, it would just register as drawing on the screen. And so pressing the easy button makes it go away, and then it's just back to computer control again. The one other thing I guess I forgot to mention what I was just now noticing, in your little side navigation bars, again, because this functions similar to a giant tablet or a smartphone, you do also have the option, like your back button would be in that little menu as well. If you want to see all of the apps or the inputs, everything that is currently open, you can see that from right in there as well. So if it's getting kind of bogged down, if it's going slow, you can go in and see if there's a whole bunch of apps and programs open and X out of things that might be slowing down what you're trying to do. Do you think of anything else, Doc?
I think that covers everything.
Yeah, that's 99% of the usage, because obviously, like you can see, there are other apps and things in here, but for the most part, especially since your boards are still hooked up to your teacher computer, a lot of some of your online stuff that you're probably going to be using directly from your computer. But again, there is a browser built in here if you're wanting to completely run stuff from up here. If you want to add additional, like if you want to add a nice big clock or something up here, you can. So in your apps, so that was right down here in your apps, if you navigate over to your widgets, it gives you some options. If you want to like press and hold and slide in, you can add a clock to yours or those types of things. If you want little post-its or a message board, if you want quick access to some of your tools, those are in there as well. And as you add new apps, sometimes they'll give you additional options for widgets that you can put on there. And if you ever want to get rid of one of those, it's just as easy. Again, like it's a smartphone, you click, hold on it, and slide it to remove and let it go.
Okay.
And that works the same way for any just regular apps. If you want quick access to, say you want quick access to your browser, click and hold, drop it there, and then it'll always be right there on your desktop. And getting rid of it works the same way.